Hi, everyone. Welcome to Angel Borrelli Pitching and the final episode of Season 10 of The Fix. I am Angel Borrelli, and I thank you for making my podcast a great success for 10 seasons. I am already looking forward to Season 11. And welcome to my awesome co-host, Joe DeMers, former professional minor league pitcher and current assistant pitching coach at the University of Washington. So great to be with you, Joe, and thank you for your contribution during this last season.
Well, thank you for having me, Angel. This has been a blast, and I've learned a lot already this one season.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. Today's, we talked about on the last episode all the things about injuries, and we promised everyone to talk about some ideas for ways to use this season really wisely, because I feel so passionate that we have to pay better attention to our pitchers. And the coolest thing for me is I've been coaching you since you were 10 years old, and to be able to now continue on with you, helping you be a better coach with what you're doing is the greatest gift I could ever ask for. It not only makes me feel like my work will live on, but it's so cool to be coaching you and also for you to respect my work for this many years. I can't tell you how much that means to me that you still look up to me and listen to everything I say and feel like I'm a great source for you to get really solid information. So I wanted to thank you for that. And it's been awesome having this relationship with you during this last season.
Yeah, it's been very special what we have, and I look forward to continue learning from you. And you got to learn from the best to be the best. So that's what I strive for.
Wow. That's awesome. Well, thank you for saying that, Joe. So anyway, to all the coaches out there, this is kind of a really special show for you because I want to inspire you to be creative, and I want to inspire you to put your thinking caps on and inspire you to have a different October, November, and December than you've ever had before with what you do with your pitchers. Even if there's can be some small change of paying attention to some things that I think get forgotten, I would be so happy to know that you did that, because if we can save one arm, I want to remind everyone, and Joe, this is important for you too to know, and keep in the forefront of your mind every day. The most amount of injuries occur in spring training or the first 2 months of the season. That says something. That has never been any different. Since 1995, I've known that, and it has not changed. And so I think that that's important information. And I also think that October, November, and December are very special months because I don't think we realize the pressure that performance athletes are under. And they don't have that pressure right now. And when I see pitchers on the field playing right now in games, which is what I see in California, baseball never sleeps. There's travel teams that are scheduled through to January, and then they'll just shift over to their high school teams. It's heartbreaking. When I look at them and I see all the arms, and I see them right now grinding in a game again, even if it's a scrimmage, because the coaches are there watching. And so an athlete's not going to say, oh, it's October, I don't have to try so hard. When I see this, all I see are a bunch of fatigued arms. That's what I see, and it breaks my heart. So, regardless of the situation, it's too late. I mean, schools have schedules. So, instead of just, okay, well, we're going to be playing during these months, or we go late into the season or whatever, I think that if we can make the best out of it and know that we're making some type of a contribution to each pitcher, I think it would go a long way. And I think we have to inspire our pitchers to take better care of themselves, especially during this time of the year.
I agree.
So, yeah, so I want everyone to think about all the things that I'm going to suggest, pick the ones that seem good, and let them be a springboard for you to be creative. But let's not do everything the same way. I'm out at the field, I'm in different places where I see baseball games, pitchers, warm ups. And when I watch what goes on, I'm looking at the same thing. There's never anything different. There's no focus on skills. It's like play catch, go out on the field, play catch. Then they're done playing catch. And then the pitchers either stand around or they're doing something. And it's like, it's like everybody practices their skill more than the pitchers do. Do you know what I mean when I say that, Joe?
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I think you see hitters working on their craft all the time, and pitchers don't really pay the same amount of hours as those hitters do.
Exactly, and I think 2 things have to happen. One is the pitchers need to be inspired, and you need to say to them, "Hey, just because you're only in the game once every 4 or 5 days doesn't mean that you're not developing your skill every day, and you can't develop it playing catch." There are skills within the skill. When somebody plays catch, they play catch the same way every day. Now, and I agree, and I've always said this. I'm jealous when I watch how hitters nobody criticizes a hitter for wanting to be better, even if he hit a bunch of home runs. Nobody says, "Hey, no, don't go in the cage and work on your swing or trying to figure out your front leg or this or that." Nobody says a word. But when pitchers are thinking about making an adjustment, it's sort of like, "Don't touch anything. You're throwing strikes." And I think that that's where the problem lies. So I think that change can't happen until coaches start to look at the pitchers differently than they usually do, which is let's not be afraid to think about how they do what they do. And let's make sure we continue to inspire them to take care of themselves and to be accountable. A pitcher should not be okay with him having a pitching motion that is sloppy. He should not be okay with that his arm hurts every time he pitches, and then he just does a few little things here and there, and then 3 days later or 2 days later, he's throwing the same way again, and he's hurting again. Pitchers tend to think that's part of pitching. It is not, and I think that we have to all start to look at things differently before we actually start doing things differently. And then those things we do differently can have a huge, profound effect. And you're in such a fantastic place, Joe. So, the questions you're going to ask, and I'm going to ask you to ask me some questions because you're a coach now. And if it's a question that you have, there's some coach out there asking the same question. So I want to make some suggestions to you for creative ideas. And because your expertise is pitching and mine is motion, the pitching motion, I think for you to have that curiosity and also the background you have, and then also to combine that with some ideas about the motion. Pitching is strategy, it's the pitches, but it's the pitching motion that gets the job done. And there is not enough attention paid to that, verified by some of the statistics we talked about in the last show. And just when you just in general look, you can see that pitchers are not being taken care of as well as they should be, could be, and also they need to take better care of themselves. So anyway, I know that you started coaching and I know that your season you just started to get together last week again. So tell me, I'd love for you to ask me some questions that you think would help you be a better pitching coach or whatever it is that's on your mind, something you see, something you need help with. So let's start with that.
Yeah. So first thing that comes to mind is hitters. They can take as many swings as they want, but pitchers can't throw 150 throws a day, So what are some things pitchers can do to really hone in on their skill as a pitcher without throwing? Like, what are some dry drills or exercises in the gym that guys can do that isn't throwing but helps with mechanics or arm strength? That's a very broad question, but does anything come to mind?
Yes, well, the gym is one thing, and hopefully everybody's doing an off-season training program. And even though you're kind of in season in a sense, because you are the pitchers are pitching, you're having scrimmages. So off-season training is critical. And if your strength coach doesn't have the pitchers on a different program than the position players, you need to talk to your strength coach. Now, solid strength coaches know this. So they need to be addressing all the imbalances and it's hard to play catch up with that when you're still pitching. So this is why off season training should be off season. But if you're kind of in this middle thing where you are pitching, but it's not, league games, et cetera, et cetera, the strength coach should have solid programs that still allow the pitchers to heal themselves and build. Now, in terms of what goes on in the field, this is where I think the best thing can happen. First of all, throwing 60 feet 6 inches downhill is the thing that you really have to control. Okay. And where the pitcher is trying to locate pitches because his efforting and the trajectory of the ball and the variables of the mound make it pitching. So that is where we absolutely need to control what happens. But doing modified things, and unless you're releasing a ball, it's hard to work on some of the specific skills that pitchers really need so they don't get injured. That is why my guys, in fact, I'm doing something very creative this off season where like I have pitchers that want to add in a certain pitch, et cetera. And they're actually going to be doing wrist work and finger work that actually releases a ball so that they're not exposing their shoulder, but they're working on the part of the pitch that's the most important. Now, I want to make a suggestion, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but I have a lot of great pitchers that fly in to work with me. I am in shock over how many pitchers that they tell me about their problems with location or they tell me about the pitching stuff and they have forearm soreness and they have this and that soreness and that when I am doing my initial just look see at them watching them my hand eye is drawn to their hand and to their wrist and I am in shock at how many funky four seam grips I see.
Yeah.
I'm like in shock. I'm not a pitching coach, but and I think most of my listeners know, I get obsessed about things. Last 3 years, I've been obsessed about the fingers and the wrist. That is what produces the movement on the ball. The wrist is the last joint that imparts velocity to the ball. So, in answer to your question, how many times have you seen pitchers working on the skill of just the wrist through the fingers?
It's
I mean,
genius.
you can go in the gym. Thank you.
Hmm.
Yes, you can do rice bucket, which pitchers should be doing. Yes, you want to do wrist flexion and extension. Yes, you want to do forearm supination, pronation, reverse curls. But I'm talking about there's nothing that duplicates what you're actually doing. And anybody who works with movement knows this. I can teach you all day the concepts and help build certain skills, but until you're actually doing it in the motion, it's not the same thing. So my job is to understand it. So I'm going to start you with the first thing I want you to do, and then we're going to reverse engineer some ideas for what you just asked me. Okay, so, and I want all the coaches to please do this. You will be in shock at what you see. I want you to line all your pitchers up on one line, not in a circle. I want you to tell them to take a four seam grip and to hold their arm out in front of them at shoulder height. And you're going to be looking at them standing in front of them and you're going to see their fingertips and you'll see their thumb. So you're going to be looking at them from face on. Don't have them hold the palm up. Have them looking right at the grip. And I want you to pay attention to the things that we know need to be true. For example, you're their pitching coach. So you may have a certain way that you think a four seam should be held, and that is your right to do that. And you were very successful, so you have even more right to say that. I, being not a pitcher, but understanding the mechanics of the fingers and the wrist, and then also to, interviewing tons of pitchers and working with tons of coaches and blah, blah, blah. I know that there's certain ways that if the fingers are too far apart, or if the finger is too much onto the smooth part of the ball, or if the thumb isn't exactly in the middle underneath, you're going to have funky spin. You're going to have weird things happen. And so, with your knowledge and with all the pitching coaches out there doing this, take a look to see if you see that one, the ball is being held correctly with the fingers being placed so that you're not getting side spin. Do you understand what I mean, Joe?
Absolutely.
And you understand that there's some pitchers, they lay their fingers too far over the seams, the very last fingernail to knuckle.
Hmm.
That's the most important part of the grip. Okay, so and you have to pull against the seams. So you can look at what they're doing, and if you see something totally odd and you already have seen them throw, you might already know, oh, this is why. This is why this guy's ball comes out of his hand funny. We all know when we see something that looks funny. We may not know exactly why, but I'll see a really loose wrist and it looks ridiculously loose. And I'm like, something's wrong. They'll hold it. It just looks wrong. So look at your pictures from straight on. So now you're going to be looking at the finger placement. The next thing is they should be holding that ball out straight, meaning their elbow's going to be straight, and I want their wrist absolutely straight. So they're actually just like really aiming that ball at you, shoulder height, and you do not see the ball lower than the wrist and you do not see the ball higher than the wrist. The biggest problem with pitchers is their wrist, and the wrist issues cause forearm tightness. The forearm doesn't just get tight on its own, it's an in between muscle and it rotates side to side. The injuries that people get, that pitchers get, that lead to Tommy John, are from fatigue of the forearm, but it's not from it being a flexor. It's from it being a rotator. And what is it rotating? It's rotating the wrist. Those are the muscles. When you rotate the wrist, the forearm muscles are doing that. That's why it gets tweaked at the inside of the elbow. Now, if you've got a grip and your ball is lower than your wrist, that ball has to eventually come uphill to get to a straight place. And the wrist should be straight during the motion. And when it gets up into the motion, the max external rotation, yes, the ball looks lower than the wrist. That's because gravity's pulling it down. And then as you accelerate, it goes back into full straight extension as you pull. And so the wrist should be straight. So you want to look at when he holds the ball out, are you seeing like if you sneezed in front of it, the ball would fall out of his hand? He should be gripping that because obviously the ball's facing downward. He should have a wrist that when he grips, it doesn't cause the wrist to flex, meaning that the force on the fingers, he's getting wrist flexion. He should be able to have a strong grip with the straight wrist. So you're going to line everyone up and you're going to start with that. The next thing is have them all face to where you're looking inside their glove as if you're like behind the rubber and they're going from the stretch. Look at their wrist position in the glove.
It should be neutral.
It should be neutral. And
Okay.
sometimes this means the kid's glove is in the wrong place.
Hmm.
Maybe his glove is so far to the right of his head, let's say a righty, that he's all bent over. So when he comes out, he hooks. In coaches, I suggest you take one idea at a time and just say, okay, today, and you work with your pitchers. Today, we're working on the wrist and the fingers. And you're going to watch them and see who hooks, who comes out of the glove with a flexed wrist. So, everyone, turn your palm up, then bend your fingers into your palm, and then bend your wrist. Notice the tightness in your forearm. That is called wrist flexion. that flexion should not be in the motion at any time, any degree of it. And the reason why pitchers get injured is, especially the youth pitchers, is they're flexed inside the glove and they come out of the glove like they're pawing their way out. And their wrist is sometimes it doesn't release and they end up hooking as they come out of the bottom of the glove. You know what I'm talking about, right, Joe?
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of times where the pitcher puts his glove, forces his wrist into flexion. So I work with my pitchers who have forearm pain or elbow pain or even shoulder pain. I work with their glove position. Actually, I have them put the ball near their sternum without a glove and make sure their four seam grip looks good and their wrist isn't in too funky of a position. It can be slightly extended, meaning the knuckles are higher than the back of the wrist in the glove, but it can't be flexed. Flexion is the enemy. And so you put that there, and let's say they're down real low and you notice, or they're in a certain place, they can't even hold the ball. They have to flex their wrist. Then you make them lower it to where their wrist feels comfortable. Then you have them put your glove on top of it. These are things you can do with them before they even throw a ball. Okay, so now we got the wrist going, and now we've got the pitchers conscious about it. Then you put them into, and then here's where we begin, so that you're not just having them go out and throw and play catch, and everything's the same. So now you get them ready to start throwing, have them line up with each other face to face, 15 feet apart, and you do the wrist exercise, Joe. And for everybody in my strength and conditioning book for training the elbow, you'll see wrist flips in there. But Joe, you know the exercise where the pitcher just holds his arm out in front at shoulder height. He has the four seam grip, which right now you should be working on that. Try to work on one grip at a time on a different day. And he's only holding his arm out. If he's a righty, his left arm is underneath his tricep he holds it at shoulder height. His forearm is perpendicular to the ground. He's got the four seam grip, and then he extends his elbow as he releases the ball. So he's working on the pulling against the ball and the way the wrist works in pitching, which, by the way, it goes from extension through the ball. As you pull against it, your wrist does flex. That's the time that it flexes. And by that time, you're already into your follow through. You know which exercise I'm talking about, Joe?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's how you take it from looking at their grip, make the changes, have them try it, especially people who have made a slight change. And I guarantee you're going to be shocked at whether you see finger pressure problems or placement, and especially the thumb. Everyone knows the thumb is what you change when you want to get a different type of spin, right? So you don't want that. You want it on the middle. You want it in the middle of the ball. Sometimes you'll see that they're holding the ball funny, that they're holding the horseshoe is in a funny shape. And if you see something funny, you ask them, do you know you're doing this? Sometimes a pitcher will have this weird way he does things, and it's up to you to decide if that's benefiting him. But most of the time, and this is like the same whenever I see a pitcher on what I call the wrong side of the rubber, I say, are you on that side of the rubber for a reason? And most of them go, oh, no. If they don't have a reason why that grip looks funny or why it looks weird, then change it to what's normal. When you learn what's normal and you feel it, then if you want to get exotic or do something different, you almost have a right to do that. But if it looks sloppy and there's no reason and they're not even conscious of it, don't be afraid to change it. So they start with the wrist flips. That way they're really getting the feel. And you can have the partner get down to catch it or actually on a fastball, you don't really have to. But if you want, sometimes I have the partner go down, the catcher go down as the pitcher is doing his wrist releases because he should be getting a downward trajectory on it. So you're getting the exercise for the fingers and you're getting the trajectory. And on your high powered pitchers, back them up. They don't need to be 5 feet in front of the catcher. The wrist, according to science, and all of these numbers can be plus or minus, the wrist contributes 21% of the velocity of the ball. And it's the last joint. The shoulder passes the energy into the wrist. You can have great mechanics, but if you have a funky wrist or a funky grip, you're not going to throw hard. And if you can't throw and control a fastball, you know, Joe, you're not going to have any luck with anything else. So, the finger releases should be done with consciousness, and you should actually play around with them and say, okay, now on this release, lift, don't put too much pressure in your middle finger. Put a lot in your index and watch what the ball does. No, now put too much pressure in the middle and not in this. And let them learn how to have equal pressure in the fingers for a fastball, which makes it go straight. And then you can, as the pitching coach, teach how to work with that pressure. But this is the time to do it when they're only focusing from wrist to fingertips. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does.
It's cool, right?
Very cool.
And then the next thing is, and you've done this a million times with me, you back them up and you get them into max external rotation position. So this is where the pitcher's, so if he's a righty, his left leg's in front, his right leg is in the back. He's in a perfectly stabilized position. His arm is back into what's called max external rotation. And the exercise is that all he does is bring his shoulder through, release the ball, and he comes over his front leg. Now you're working on the ball release from max external, and you're teaching going over the front leg, and you're teaching the hand to go to the same place each time. So now what you've started to do is reverse engineer the motion using the fingers, using the wrist, and now using the shoulder. But you have to be able to do this. And then you're also teaching going over the front leg so they learn how to extend out with their arm so their wrist can actually do what it does. If you don't have an arm that knows how to get to a release point, your fingers and wrists can't work correctly. There's a place out in front of you where when you pull with the fingers against the ball, you almost have to have room to do that. So pitchers that don't understand, this is why you guys all say, get out in front, get out in front. Well, getting out in front is a product of getting over the front leg. So now you've started to increase, you're moving backwards in the motion, you're dealing with the hand. Now you're dealing with looking and seeing also, can the pitchers release the ball from their shoulder? Are they leading with their elbow? So now you've added in a drill, working on the front end. They can be working from 15 to 20 feet and they're not stressing their arm. What they're actually doing, it's like being in the gym training without the fatigue that comes from throwing fully. Fatigue sets in with pitchers a lot of times because they're doing things wrong. Doing it right is easy. Doing it wrong is difficult. So instead of looking at, oh, they're releasing a ball, it could fatigue them. No, they're only at 15, 20 feet or 25 feet. They're doing the front end of the motion. They're getting actually ball release conditioning. Something, I mean, you can train your chest all day and you can definitely build the accelerators and do everything you want to do, but you have to know how to use it. So now you're looking at, are they going from their shoulder to the hand on release, or is somebody leading with the elbow? You don't usually see mixed up acceleration types when you're doing a drill like this because usually a pitcher who throws incorrectly, he's done something at the beginning of his motion that caused it. So now you're building in good mechanics. The other thing is that the most important thing in pitching to me is tunneling your pitches. I don't care how good your pitches are. If your release point's different and the hitters are so good, if they can see them, I mean, I don't know anything about the strategy of pitches like, oh, you throw this pitch and then you throw this one to throw them off. That's your job. But here's what I do know. I don't care how good you strategize your pitch selection. If the ball's not coming out of the hand in the same place, then you're going to be giving up, 60% of that advantage. So to me, when you're doing this drill, and they're in max external going forward, you make sure that they understand that their arm is connected to their trunk. The arm goes for the ride with the trunk moving forward. If a pitcher learns to pitch with his trunk muscles going forward and his shoulder blades together, his hand's going to go in the same place every time because the hand is connected to the shoulder and the shoulder is connected to the trunk. And it can be controlled by that as it moves forward. So now you've gone from looking at grips, wrist releases, throwing from max external rotation. Now you're working on follow through and you're noticing the whole time for key elements that are critical for a pitcher to be good. You can come out of the glove and have the greatest stride in the world. You can have the best rotation in the world. But if when you get to where you're squared up to the target, your front leg is in the wrong place, or it's so weak and you don't know how to have it be stable, or your foot ankle is rolling around, or your head starts to pull your body sideways. Whatever it is that you do, if you're doing it at that moment, that is what is going to affect pitch velocity and location. Everything has to lead up to this front end. So in this season here, I mean, if it's like 1 week before the season starts, pitchers are very antsy. So this is the gift of this season, is that we're able to focus on these details and not have to worry about pressure. They actually feel the freedom to maybe make an adjustment. And from your watching them do this drill, it tells you everything you need to know. And by the way, it also tells you what they need to be working on in the gym. So if the guy can't keep his front leg under control as he goes over it, he needs to be doing some single leg work. He needs to be doing lunges. You should have communication with a strength coach. Bring your strength coach out there and say, look at this guy here. When he goes over his front leg, see that ankle? He can't keep it solid. And look at his lunge position here. He keeps pulling the knee backward. He doesn't know how to tilt over his front leg. Get your strength coaches out there. They should be taking notes, because obviously that's what I do. I'm working with mechanics in and outside of the gym. Then they bring that strength. But from just this simple drill here, Joe, this is how you can begin to get a handle on what they need. And also you're working on the most important part of the motion, and they're able to release a ball. They have to be able to do some work with releasing a ball, and they should be working on this every day. And as long as the distance is short and they're flat, plus you have other things you're going to be working on with them, this is an awesome way to work on skill development. This is the one thing that pitchers don't work on. And what I want to say, last thing I'm going to say on this topic, when I watch hitters, I'm fascinated by hitters and the way they practice. And when I see them hitting off a tee, I go, oh, okay, I see what they're doing. They're not working with the aspect of the ball coming at them. They're actually working on that contacting the ball with the bat. So they're working on some specific skill that isolates a specific skill, so that when it's big time, the ball's coming at them, they've worked on that skill of that contact. Think of this as hitting off the tee for a pitcher. He's got his leg in position, his arm is back, and all he's doing is going forward. Because of the drill, it controls the velocity. So this isn't a drill where like, let's try to ramp it up. No, this is a technique drill and a technical drill. And I guarantee if as a coach and all you coaches, I've always said you guys are geniuses. If you just create the environment and do this, you will not believe the ideas you're going to get. And also, it's going to give you new information about each one of your pitchers and what this kid needs. If you're seeing something glaring at this part of the motion, trust me, it's where you need to be working because the rest, nothing else is going to help this part of the motion unless you work on the skills at this part of the motion.
Yeah. And the off season's a great time to hone in on that.
Exactly. So, Joe, we were talking the other day, and you mentioned that you saw that a lot of guys had their arm wasn't in the right place at the right time. We talked about that last week, the importance of the stride foot contact arm angle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I see a lot of guys with an early arm, like they're in layback before their front foot even hits the ground.
yeah.
And I also saw a bunch of late arms where they were below 90 degrees at stride foot contact.
Yes, it's complicated changing arm action, and of course, the way they're getting there. If it's not there at the right time, it's usually because they're taking the long way around. And if it's there too soon, it's probably because they haven't created a length for their arm that matches the length of their leg. So there's a lot of things to look at. But here's one thing that is a principle that I use because teaching motion is my expertise. And so here's what I know. If you don't know where you're supposed to get, then you're going to have different ways of getting there. The most important thing for a pitcher to understand is where am I supposed to be? Where's my arm supposed to get? And pitchers don't always look like they know that it's the ball that needs to get up to shoulder height. They do crazy configurations with their body, and it's very strange some of the things they do, but it's almost like they don't realize that this is about the ball. You're supposed to have the ball in the glove and hide it and then bring it out of the glove, go through a configuration so you can accelerate it. So what I like to do, and this is just one tip for this problem, is so you line them all up to start playing catch and you have them stand sideways. They're not going to do a knee lift. And you have them stand sideways like they're pitching from the stretch. And let's take the righty. You have him put his arm up in the stride foot contact position. And just to remind everyone, if you do it right now, if you're a righty, you just turn your head. Your upper arm should be at shoulder height. That would be 90 degrees between the upper arm and the body. Bend the elbow to 90 degrees. That's a nice place to be. Bend the elbow so your arm is now shortened. And then the angle of the forearm should be, if we were up against a clock, that the old fashioned type with numbers, that forearm would be angling to 10. If you're a lefty, they'd be angling towards 2. So your forearm is not laying parallel to the ground. It's up 45 degrees. That forearm angle indicates rotation. And you put the pitcher's arm there and you tell him to turn, look at who he's going to throw to, and then he throws from there. He has to feel where that angle is supposed to be and where the arm is supposed to be before he can figure out, now how do I get there in the best way possible. First, he has to understand that the arm has to get there. And when he's just stepping out, because he's thinking about just throwing, the front leg is going to just step out and he's going to touch down and he's going to throw. And that's going to be his feeling of the way it feels to have his arm be there when the front foot lands. And since this is sort of an innate timing in the body, it's very cool. So now all of a sudden he knows ball is up here. I stepped out, I touched down, and the minute he touches down, he starts to throw. And that is the way it's supposed to be. He's not supposed to be in any other shape during that stride part of the motion. That's the first thing you start with. Once you do that, Then you say to them, now show me, how would you get there if you were coming out of the glove so that when the ball was there, your front foot would be touching down? And that's the beginning of working with that skill. And that's another thing that they can work with 15 to 20 feet away, because guess what? The timing doesn't change if you're throwing further.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's another way to work. So when the guys come out to practice, maybe today's going to be wrist day. And then tomorrow you say, okay, tomorrow we're going to work on the perfection of the arm at stride foot contact. And so you can begin to start to create skill training, development. This should be about pitcher development during these months. That's why I don't like to see guys in games. But unfortunately, that's the way it goes. Competitive games are the biggest problem that get in the way of this kind of training. But I know that with probably your school too, Joe, you're just doing scrimmages, right?
Yeah, we got inner squads.
Yeah, so that is like developmental training,
Hmm.
and then they're able to take this to the mound. So does that answer some of your questions?
Those are two perfect answers for what I was looking for.
Do you I think the other thing that I want coaches to do during this season is I want you to put some demands on your guys. I want you to tell your guys they need to weigh in every day. They need to find a place in their school or whatever to weigh in, and that you want to, and they should be keeping track of it. And then you, once a week, should say, okay, had a change in their weight, and you have them show you or tell you the change. That is the easiest way for you to know that they're training. And you tell them you want their weight, you want them to put on some muscle mass. They in this stage of the game need to be rebuilding muscle mass from muscle mass that is lost. So having guys weigh in is the easiest way for you to keep track of them. I get texts in the morning from all my pitchers who are excited that they put on 10 pounds in 10 days because they're training so hard right now. The guys that are in true off season, and they're loving it. And we have a goal for them. But this is a way for you to put some mandates on them. The other thing is you want to be sure that they're in the gym training, and you want to be sure that they are letting you know what it is that's happening in terms of any vulnerabilities they have that's showing up in the gym. So if they tell you my shoulder's been hurting in the gym, my forearm, that they must come and tell you so that you know how to deal with it, because you can't deal with it if you don't know about it. And it may be a matter that they have to see a trainer. It may be a matter that you have to talk to the strength coach, but they have to be held accountable for improving their body. And I think this is a talk you have to have with them. Even I tell my guys, I cannot be inside your head. You have to tell me. The other thing is they need to analyze, and you need to, when you can, help them with understanding where are their vulnerabilities in their motion. A pitcher is vulnerable to walks. He is vulnerable to injury when he doesn't do things right. So it affects his body and his performance. So if you see that a pitcher he's unable to balance when he lifts his front leg, he looks like he's falling off, that he doesn't know how to handle single leg balance. Let's say he doesn't know how to use his back leg correctly, so he's pulling it off. So he's only pitching on one leg. Let's say you see him falling off during acceleration, something you'll see if you have them do these drills. When you see a vulnerability for the pitcher in his motion, remember that leads to a vulnerability over the plate. So now you've got pitchers and you're saying to them, listen, your legs are weak, and I need you to get stronger in the gym. I think you cannot separate their development in the gym for their development on the mound, because guess what? If he gets injured, well, then you're the one that's stuck. So for you to stick your nose into this is very important. And I think coaches don't understand that this is all part of the whole package. You can't just have them do what they do on the field. And I would hold them accountable and responsible for making sure that you see some improvement over the next few months. And what I would also consider is doing some things on the field, the things you talked about, Joe, without releasing a ball, that actually work on the skills. So, for example, you know how to do a walking lunge, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so they do a walking lunge, but the leg that's leading is their leg that their right leg or left leg, depending on whatever leg they land with, depending if they're righty or lefty. So let's say that you're working on stability of the front leg. I'm not talking about doing a walking lunge across the field the way you see teams do, where everyone looks different, they're all falling all over the place, and nobody cares about technique. You put their hands over their head. You make them lead out with their lead leg. You make sure they don't sink down too far because that's easy. You make that leg, that thigh be at a 45-degree angle, and you work just on that lead leg and with the stability of the back leg. Now, that's exactly what they look like when they land in their stride or when they're facing to throw the ball. Then you have them go across the field and you have them lift up over the front leg. And maybe their arms are out at the sides now. They're up at the shoulder height so that you're working on the trunk tilt. And you're not looking at this as a warm up. You're saying, hey, we're working on leg skill training today. Maybe you do the drill of going over the front leg by releasing a ball. And then you say, okay, put the ball down. Let's go work on our front leg stability. And you isolate that front leg. They're doing stuff in the gym with weights that balance both sides. It's totally okay on the field to work with these critical characteristics that actually are part of their motion. So now you're starting to get them thinking about how they're doing things. And the more you can work on stability of a pitcher and also the forward motion of acceleration, when those pieces come together, I guarantee you the pitcher who really gets that, he's going to make sure that what he does at the beginning of the motion allows that to happen at the end. Most guys are beginning of the motion dominant. They have this big leg kick, this big leg swing, everything's big, big, big. And by the time the front foot is touched down, they've already created a mess for the end of the motion. Be specific about the end, work with the end of the motion first. And this might go on for a full month. And I guarantee you'll see guys doing things differently at the beginning of the motion because they now know where they're trying to get. And there's that rule again. If you know what you want to be at the end, you'll know how to work at the beginning. And it's a very cool thing to see. And I have witnessed this for 28, 29 years now working with pitchers, the metamorphosis of sloppy mechanics into great mechanics. So does that give you some ideas?
That's phenomenal. That's exactly what I wanted to hear, though. That's perfect. Thank you, Angel.
It's a place to start, and
Yeah,
it's a place where I guarantee for all you coaches, anything I've said, if it gives you another idea, go ahead and try it. Get the pitchers to focus on the way they're doing what they do, not just throwing the ball. And the more you bring consciousness to that, the more you're going to see great results. And they should be working on something every day. And I've just given you a few ideas, but put your little thinking caps on and be creative and let this be an off season like no other off season, so that even if you're playing and you're doing scrimmages, you're working on pitcher development. Now, this doesn't mean PFPs. This doesn't mean holding guys on base. I'm talking about pitching motion development because that's where you'll keep the injuries from occurring. So, anyway, so Joe, it's been so great having you for this season, and I thank you so much. And of course, I'm only a phone call away for you. And to all my listeners, I've got some great products that are perfect for the off season. The strength training for the elbow is it's got in season, off season. It's got great exercises the First Pitch Strike program, where you'll see Joe in it. And it's a great program for development of the arm and also care. It's an arm care program that is not only a great warm up and recovery, but it also is diagnostic in the sense if something's wrong, there's a book that comes with it. You can actually figure out if something hurts you, what muscle it actually is. And it's also rehab, because if something's bothering you, it's the exercises that you're able to do when you're injured, and it can rehab your injuries. And if you don't understand rotation, which is where velocity is developed, I have a great book on rotation. So please go to my website at Angel Borrelli Pitching and check out some of the products, which would be great for you to have during the off season. And of course, remember, you can always email me at angel@gymscience.com. And I will be looking forward to season 11. So thank you all for making my podcast such a success. And Joe, thank you again for everything.
Yeah, go get those products and have a great off season, everyone. And thank you, Angel.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.